So I would challenge people through social anxiety, through social awkwardness, be the person to just stick your arm out, your hand out, and introduce yourself. Because I couldn't imagine what this group and this community would look like if I hadn't done that.
Welcome back to the Own Your Awkward podcast. I'm your host, Andy Vargo, and every episode we get into what has made our guests vulnerable and how they've learned how to own their awkward in order to live their best life. Stay tuned so you can hear every awkward moment in today's show. Hey friends, we are going to get so awkward today. You might even see I'm not even wearing my awkward shirt. Well, I am, but it's hidden. That's how awkward it is because I've got my awesome friend here today, Sean Leacy, and Sean is with a group I love being a part of, the Tacoma Dads Group. Sean, how are you?
I am doing pretty great, actually. So just
Excellent.
happy to be here.
Hey, I am so glad to have you on. It's so funny to have people that like you interact with around town, and then we're like, okay, we're going to sit down and do the awkward thing. So I am just stoked to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So, Sean, I like to start out with just kind of a fun, different kind of take and figure out what's something just amazing you see going on in the world. What's the greatest thing going on in your life right now or in the world that you see?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be biased, of course. The Tacoma Dads Group is pretty awesome. But for me, it is. I mean, it's a very personal thing with the Dads Group because it's developed into a community of dads in
Mhm.
a space where dads have historically just kind of not had friends. And so, being a fairly awkward child, teenager, 20 something, into the 30s, and now into my 40s. This is the first time in my life where I've really felt like I've been able to make friends and friends that are wanting to build community and be there together. And so seeing that happen, seeing this come together, this grow, seeing people see our sweatshirts and our shirts around town and being like, "Hey, Tacoma Dads,"
Right?
that this reputation's going ahead of us now, and that brings me immense amounts of joy and pride in what this has all become. So yeah, that's big time. And then seeing the kids at, family days and adventure days and such, seeing the kids excited to see friends that they don't know from school, they only know them through the Dads Group, and then seeing them build their friendships and want to hang out more outside of, major events, is just, yeah, it's wonderful.
It's an awesome thing, and like you said, it's hard to find adult friends. We pressure kids and oh, go up, make friends, say hi, ask them to be your friend, and all this stuff. And I remember that conversation when I was a kid and being forced to go knock on the neighbor's door of someone new moved into town. It's like you got to go introduce yourself, and it's so awkward and feels like you don't know where to start, and you don't know if you have anything in common, and so having a group like this is huge because you would know you at least have that thing in common. And then you
Yeah.
can find the other commonalities and you see it where, man, these guys really hit it off and those guys really hit it off. And that's what it's all about. We're not all going to have everything in common, but we've got that one starting point.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's tough. If you see a new guy coming in, there's always that, like, at least now, we have the shirts and stuff on so that if we're
Mhm.
at a place, people can see and know that, oh yeah, they're a part of this. But
Right.
we don't always like get a chance to talk to people before they show up. And
Hmm.
so yeah, it's making friends as an adult is super awkward and super hard. And I'm just glad that this exists so that we can actually do it.
Yeah, and I know that several of us have made the same comment because I know I've said it and I've heard other people say it, where you're at an event and you're torn between, oh, I haven't seen Sean for a while, I haven't seen so and so for a while, and I want to catch up and have a conversation, but there's also new people I want to make sure feel welcome, and so you're
Yeah.
you're kind of balancing that time of, oh man, it's good to see you, but I don't know them yet, and I want to make sure that they come back and don't feel like they were ignored.
Yeah. And I'm eternally grateful that there are more dads that are doing that, because that takes all of that pressure off of me. Like,
Exactly.
in the early days of this group, like I had to make sure that I was making direct contact with everybody as they came in, because there were only a handful of us that would ever show up to an event. And so now we have so many more dads that are a little bit more outgoing, or at least a little bit, it's a little bit easier for them to come up and say hi to a new person. And I have dealt with terrible social anxiety all my life. And so the idea of going up and saying hi to someone, immediately my mind starts spiraling down the road of like, oh, they probably aren't even a part of this group. They're just
Right.
here, enjoying a drink, and you're going to be a weird dude that's just going to walk up and say hi. And
Crashing their
like,
table.
I promise I'm not hitting on you. Like, I'm just a
Right.
dad. Like,
Yeah. I'm just a dad that wants to make friends. I
I
thought you
just
might
want to
need
be,
a
will
friend
you be my
too.
friend?
Yeah. You look
Like,
like you could use a friend.
yeah,
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, no, it's a good point, and I think that is huge to acknowledge because you mentioned how amazing this community is, and it's been because of how much work you have put in, and I know others have put in a lot of work, but you've been at the center of it for a long time now, and it things like this become great because they're curated and because people put the love and attention and energy into them. They don't happen on accident.
sure.
So just
Sure.
had to
Well, I
say
appreciate that. Yeah, no,
that. We appreciate you.
it's come a long way. We started in 2016. I was just a dad joining, up with the original, the original organizer for the group. And then I took over in 2018, I think, 2018, 2019. And so we've been rocking along ever since, through the pandemic and everything. And we're much bigger on this side of that than we were before.
Yeah, it's been great to see. All right, we're gonna come back to that, but we got to get into Sean. What makes you so awkward? What's that thing you've had to own in order to just be okay out there in life?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of my own internalized awkwardness and externalized awkwardness, um, all boils down to, and maybe this is a little cheating or not, but autism.
Mm,
It's something that I didn't realize that I was autistic when I was a child. That
mhm,
was not something that was even on the radar. Although, hearing my mom reference how I was as a child, and even using things like, the term Asperger's isn't really used anymore.
mhm,
But she would always refer to me as being Asperger's level smart,
mm.
and just use that term, but like never connected the synapses to put those things together and go, oh, maybe he is.
Yeah, never
Uh,
actually took it further to look into it and say, maybe there's a reason he's that smart
yeah,
in that way.
yeah. And so like in it, I really felt the awkwardness as something that was something I recognized in junior high. And, in the early 90s in junior high, it was not cool like it is now. I don't know if it's necessarily cool now, but it's way more socially acceptable to be into comic books and video games. And, I loved reading spy novels or pretending I was a spy with a buddy of mine. And we were both very awkward. In hindsight, the likelihood that he is autistic as well is very high. So, like, it's just, again, looking in hindsight.
Yeah,
Um,
it sure clears
and
everything up,
so,
doesn't
yeah,
it?
it does. It really, and I didn't know that until my oldest son was diagnosed.
Mm,
And then as soon as he got his formal diagnosis, it took time for me to come to terms with the fact that, yeah, like if he is, and he gets a very quick, diagnosis of like, yeah, this is definitely, um, you know, not quick in the sense of like the whole process takes a long time, but when
sure.
it came down to like actually getting diagnosed, it was like, yeah, this is very clearly what's going on. And also the case for probably the rest of our kids. We just haven't had the time yet to go through that formal diagnosis for them, because they're a little bit younger and not needing as many resources as he needs. Um, but I went through typical nerd geek culture, lots of harassment and bullying. I
Hmm.
missed a lot of social cues that, like, asking questions had consequences. And, if I'm asking teachers, especially, to explain, this question that they just brought up, and I'm like, okay, but that doesn't really connect with what you just said over here. So where's this? And like for me, I'm just trying to put the puzzle pieces together to figure out, the whole picture of what's being
Right.
taught or what's being said. And for the teachers, they took it as a child challenging their authority and challenging their teaching practices.
And yet here you are probably appreciating it more than anybody in the room because you're like,
Oh
wait,
yeah.
I want to make the most sense out of this. Like I want to go deeper. And you're questioning it in a way that is, I'm actually intrigued by what you told me. I want to understand the rest and this part, how does this part fit in? And they're like, what is wrong with you? Why are you, how dare you like put me on the spot?
Oh, and it's tough too, because like the other kids in the class would get angry because then it would end up like furthering a conversation that they
Oh,
just wanted to
sure.
get over with.
Mm-hmm.
Or in a worst case scenario, it would end up with like extra homework or something that was like, oh, that's a good point. I didn't bring that up. So let's go back a step and they're like, oh gosh.
Thanks a
Like
lot,
if he would have
Sean.
just kept his mouth shut, then, and then that led to a lot of physical bullying and a
Hmm.
lot of fights that I was always on the receiving end of. And
Oh,
I was not the strapping young lad that I am now. I was a beanstalk, and I was, a good 6 to 8 inches shorter than everyone else in my class at the time. So I was a very easy target
yeah.
and never really felt like I fit in anywhere. And so I followed the typical kind of neuro-spicy chameleon behavior of trying to find like different groups and dressing and acting differently depending on who I was around. And it wasn't until like realistically, it wasn't until like my early 30s that I started to like actually identify who I was and be able to own that in a way that I was able to just kind of be confident about who I am and what I've become. And
Yeah.
so up until that point, it was just, I just kind of blended in with whatever group I was in at the time.
Hmm. So how did that feel when you were before you got to your early 30s, like when you were young adult and even in school still, where you're like the guy in the crowd where you're just trying to blend in? Were you in survival mode? Were you like, did you make a conscious effort, or did it just kind of sneak up on you that you realize that's the behavior you were taking on?
Yeah, I don't think I realized that that was the behavior that I was taking on until probably my early to mid 20s.
Hmm.
Um, that was a time in my life where the term masking wasn't really something that anyone had ever heard of, or if they did, it was in like, more behind the doors, with the psychologist kind of thing. We didn't have the internet accessibility with
Right.
ADHD conversations like we do today with, TikTok and other forms of social media where people can talk about their experiences more openly.
Hmm.
So it was very lonely. you
Yeah.
know I felt like I had like one or two people that I could trust, and everyone else was held at arm's length because I didn't want them to see the other sides of me that their clique and social group would not enjoy.
Sure. Now, was there a moment where when you said in your early 30s you got to that point where you're like, I'm gonna have that confidence? Do you think there was a trigger point or something that made you make that choice? Or
Yeah, I mean, it's some of it was trying to step back through like how
revisit
detailed
the
I how
right.
detailed I want to be with, or
That's
how far back I want to go with all of this. But some of it was definitely in the process as I was deconstructing through or from my Christian faith. That
Hmm.
was a big
Yeah.
big trigger point in my early 30s where things just were not adding up,
Hmm.
and I was realizing that a lot of the beliefs that I had were beliefs that I had because I was told that's what I should, and this is how I should act, and this is what I should be. And it wasn't authentically me at all.
Yeah.
And it opened up the doors for me to start looking at not just my faith and my beliefs, but also just my personhood as an individual. Like, who am I? What am I all about? Am I just a construct of what, societal beliefs have made me want to be, or do I have any sense of anonymity in this at all? And
Right.
I realized that a lot of what I was and who I was very much so thrust upon me. And that was, yeah, I'd say 2007 was probably a big year for that. I got married in 2008. So yeah, I'd say probably around 2007 is when that was like, oh, okay.
Hmm.
Like I'm seeing a pattern of behavior, and it's not a pattern that I have naturally come across. It is just this is what I'm told to be.
Hmm. Yeah. It's like there's that game of life where you've got all the choices you make along the
Yep.
way. And we have like we're in that car, but the first third or the first however far we get in that journey are choices that really were just kind of thrust upon us. And it's like, okay, now I'm up to this point. Now I gotta rethink, were I of my own accord, would I have taken any of those turns along the way? And regardless of whether you would have or not, they're part of the past. So how do I take the rest of the journey in the direction I want to go? And it's like we
Yeah.
believe things without questioning them until we get to that point where we say, wait, why do I believe this is real? Religious or not. Like it could be as
Yeah.
simple as like how you're supposed to dress or how you talk or anything.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But
I was very grateful that in that process, I had a partner who was essentially going through the same thing.
hmm.
And as we got married and we started kind of unlearning a lot of things that we were told about what marriage should look like, we've been married for almost 16 years now, and it is like we are leaps and bounds closer now than we've ever been in our marriage. And the two of us, as we went through this process of not just deconstructing our faith, but also our upbringing, our views towards culture as a whole, both of us having missed out on many things throughout our childhood because of, religious restrictions, were, going through kind of a second childhood in like going back and like listening to the bands that we weren't supposed to listen to, and
Right.
the movies and media we weren't supposed to do.
Hmm.
Now it's like getting into Dungeons and Dragons. Like that's so much fun, and enjoying that with the dads group as a whole has been a blast.
Right.
But that was something I wasn't supposed to do.
Hmm.
And so it's
Yeah,
been nice to grow together in that.
it was funny to watch couple, I don't know if it was the last season, one of the seasons of Stranger Things where they really got into the Dungeons and Dragons idea and how taboo it was and how
Oh
scary
yeah.
like how scary these kids were because they're in this club that is unknown and it must be the most
Yep.
awful thing. And I remember thinking that's how the belief was. Like I
Yeah.
remember hearing people say, "Oh, they play Dungeons and Dragons with the rolled eyes and the you know, we got to stay
Yeah.
away from them." And that does happen though, where
Yep.
you kind of have that second childhood. I hear people talk about bands that were happening when I was in high school, and it's like they could tell you albums, the year it came out, every song
Oh
on the
yeah.
album. I'm just clueless to it, going, that's a whole part of culture I missed out on.
Yep.
And yet I lived the same, I grew up, went to school with these same people. Like I was in the same time zone.
Yeah. It's wild, it really is. But I'm glad that not only am I glad that like as we've gone through that process of unmasking and owning up to, what we've done and the people that we hurt in the process, and try to make amends for any relationships that we broke because of our perceived values at the time. But we're able to do it together, and like the two of us are able to kind of, you know, it doesn't feel as alone in that process.
Yeah.
Whereas I know a lot of friends who have gone through the same thing when they were first going through it, it was very isolating and very alone for them.
Mhm.
And at least for us, we had each other, and we built our own, little community for the two of us. And then, as we formally left the church, I invested all that time and energy and community building into what we're doing here with the
Yeah.
dads group, and embracing all the other socially awkward dads that are just trying to make friends.
Right. And that's a good, I love that you touched on creating a new community because when we change our beliefs in any form or who we are, I've been divorced and went through that from that standpoint of I'm no longer in the same space with the same people, and now that means that can be very alone. So you have to then go, well, if I'm opening the door to a party, who am I bringing into that party and who am I going to have there?
Yeah.
Because not everybody's gonna carry on. You may have some people that stay in your life as you make changes, but in a different space and maybe not in the same way too. So, but sometimes not
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah, it's tough. We lost a lot of friends through that process. And we realized too that a lot of the friends that were friends with us were more friends out of the convenience of the circle that we were in with that.
Sure.
And there was only like one or two people that have even connected with us afterwards since we left. And the rest of us have just, we've, been blacklisted or whatever it is. And
Right.
honestly, I have felt more community in the dads group and with what we built here than I've ever felt in the religious structures. Like it's, you
Hmm.
know, just seeing people come together with like a sickness and getting a meal train going and like getting like if someone's going to bring you a casserole or they're going to bring you a food from the dads group and not just do like an Uber Eats gift card or something, which is wonderful to have as well.
Right.
I love that we're all at an age now where I know that that food is going to be really good. Like,
There are some very good cooks in the dad.
yeah.
Yeah, you hear
Usually
about some of
if,
them talking. I am not one of those, so it would be an Uber gift card from me.
but that's awesome. Yeah.
But yeah, um, but yeah, there are or a fruit basket. Like here's a basket for you. Um, but yeah, that's the thing is it's neat to see the level of talents, and you have that in different
Yeah.
communities where someone can fix. I mean, I love seeing the messages that are not at all related to um I mean, they're all part of being a dad. It's all part of your life, but it's not all of the conversation isn't about, how do I handle this kid? There are so many messages that are like, who's a plumber in this group? Who can do this? Who can help me with that? Can anybody answer this question? My car broke down on the side of the road. Who do I call? And it's like instant replies from like 6 to 10 people going, "We got you." And that's what we need in a community.
Yeah. I agree. And that's what we were kind of missing in a lot of it. And some of it was, again, we were, especially over the last like 10 years, um, we were clearly, we held some values that didn't mesh well. And so most of the people kind of kept us at arm's length anyway,
Yeah.
because we were the weirdos that like, believed in equality and humanity and, you
How
know,
dare you?
personhood being okay, no matter what that personhood looks like. Yeah, just silly things that in hindsight, it's like, yeah, it was not worth the time, energy, or effort to invest in like
I,
people who are clearly not going to see things the same way we do in this.
I think that's interesting whether you were putting up the boundary or the other people were. A lot of times we sense the difference, whether
Oh
the other
yeah,
people sense it or we sense it enough to know I'm not ready to invest fully. And then we have that loss of why am I not feeling fulfilled or getting what I expect to get out of this connection, whether that's a one-on-one relationship or community. And it's because it's like subconsciously we are protecting ourselves because we know it's not the
sure,
right.
sure, yeah, I absolutely.
Yeah.
We had several very clear views that were not accepted, and I was not in a position where it was even really something that was up for debate.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to part of uh my own awkwardness when it comes to the way that I speak about things is that I tend to, spitball or brainstorm or like process externally. And sometimes that external processing comes off as me stating a fact
Mm,
or this is how I've believed my whole life just because I say it with, um, confidence.
sure.
Uh, and for me, it's just how I talk and it's how I externally process. And
Right.
so some people will hear me say things and they'll be like, "Oh, this isn't a like a conversation. This is just a person saying a thing."
Mm,
And I'm
sure.
like, "No, no, no, no!" Like,
Yeah.
so
No, this is how I communicate and in
yeah,
with myself.
yeah. And so my wife is much more articulate than I am, and she is much more empathetic and aware of how her words are being perceived. And
Hmm.
so she's really helped like in our communication, which has been kind of at the core of our marriage, has been just trying to figure out how to communicate with each other, communicate wants, needs, loves, desires, all that kind of stuff as openly and honestly with each other as possible, and having a safe space between the two of us where we can do that. And so she's really helped me better communicate to people who may not know me well enough to know that like if I'm saying something, it's not necessarily me stating a fact as it is me just brainstorming or, hey, wouldn't this be cool? And
Yeah,
like,
you're listing through the thoughts verbally doesn't mean that they are
yeah,
set in stone. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. I like to think that I'm someone who can change pretty easily.
Hmm.
Um, if I've got like a perceived, this is how like the day is going to go, the week's going to go, it can take time for me to shift gears and, take in the new information and process it into my, existing uh, outlook or worldview and go, okay, new information, awesome. How does this fit? Okay, I can see where there's conflict in the way that I thought about this. And so that causes my brain to spiral down
Right.
and deconstruct what I've already believed. But I feel like we as human beings are supposed to be doing that and
Right.
not just being like, this is how it has to be.
Yeah. You mentioned I mean we've covered faith and community and
Yeah.
life changes and all these things. And you started out mentioning how you were an adult when your son was diagnosed with autism, and then that's when you were. How did that d- affect your dynamic as a father and change your perspective of where you're at?
It really helped shift the way that we parent as a whole. My wife had already been doing this for quite a while as she was much more aware of it. And I was much more hesitant to believe that my son was autistic in my own form of self-preservation because I didn't want to believe it. Because if he was autistic, then I'm clearly autistic. And if I was autistic, that answers far too many questions. And I don't really want to face that right now.
Fair.
So like it turned into a typical neurodivergent hyperfixation, hyperfocus path of like, okay, so like sensory needs for not just him, but also for myself,
Mhm.
and realizing, oh, the reason why I'm so stressed in these scenarios is because I have sensory issues that need to be addressed.
Mhm.
And so it brought us into really dedicating our home space to be as sensory friendly for each of our children's sensory needs as possible. And then also making sure that the two of us have our own space where we can have our own sensory needs met, or, the two of us have both own very wonderful noise canceling headphones. And when we need to have those in, or, little loops, earbuds or something to help cut back on some of the noises,
Mhm.
because, kids are kids. They're not going to be sensitive to the fact that they're being too loud and it's triggering you.
Right.
Like they're,
Well,
they're just going to do it.
and I think one of the things that's such a shame is that, we find out that things are different or that someone's functioning different when they aren't able to work in the same space that people who aren't neurodivergent are. So
Yeah.
it becomes identified as what's wrong, or why aren't you able to do this, and why isn't it working? And that kind of overshadows the idea that there's so much brilliance going on because you're thinking differently. And the word neurodivergent I had not heard until a year ago. Like everything was just
Sure.
classified in a different area, and there wasn't this that I had heard of. And like you said, kind of like masking, maybe it was probably conversations behind the scenes that I hadn't been made aware
Sure.
of
Yeah.
yet. But the fact that diverging from the path isn't wrong. It's different.
Yeah.
It's a different way. And you look at like all the different people who have made brilliant discoveries and changes and things and it was because they were seeing things in a different way. And
Yeah.
I love that we're having these conversations more openly and younger, so that hopefully kids don't have to get to that point where they're felt like, man, why was it so hard? And then I figured it out. And rather than just being more like, you know what, we knew going in, or as soon as possible, we had the ability to kind of create a space, which sounds like you guys have really done in your home where every kid could have a different aspect of what's gonna make them successful in life.
Yeah. And we've worked really hard to do that. And it's, with four neurodivergent children, uh, there's not a quiet moment. And if there is a quiet moment, something's not okay. Like,
Right.
someone's
Yeah.
getting into something or,
Mhm.
taking apart something from the
We're about
youngest
to
that I can
walk into a
remember.
mess.
Yeah. Like even our he's 12 now, but our oldest, he like, as a child, just a year old, maybe less than a year old, he was going underneath our table and with his little, grip strength of a small gorilla was unscrewing all of the bolts and stuff out of our chairs.
Oh no.
And so you would have to like legitimately make sure that the chairs were sturdy because otherwise he would have gotten in there. And, like a monkey grabbing a stick, like, the kids, all of our kids have been like this, but they find tools very early. And if they don't have like actual tools, they're making them to do the things that they want. And it's always kept us on our toes.
Yeah.
And at least we have each other. Like
Mhm.
we're not going solo at this, which is super helpful.
Right.
But
And being able to see that from the viewpoint of a kid who's exploring and staying busy versus a kid who's trying to make us fall down when we sit in a chair. You,
yeah,
seeing the disconnect of, oh, he's not trying to hurt people.
yeah,
He's just using whatever he can and staying busy and keeping his hands like, wow, look at that's really cool. Look what I can do. Not thinking about, oh, when mom or dad sit on here.
yeah. It also helps kind of take some of the sting out of their reactions, or when it's clear that they are what you would consider overreacting to a situation.
Oh, sure.
Sometimes it's hard, sometimes, most of the times, it's very hard in the moment to
Yeah,
acknowledge that they are clearly something else is going on.
sure.
Like there's what I'm seeing in front of me is not the full picture. Their brain has put, two and two together and they've come up with something very different than what me as an adult put together. And
Hmm.
so trying to find out what that is helps kind of reduce some of the stress from it. My wife is much better at de-escalating the children, with a distraction of some sort, than I am. But I've learned a lot from her in that process because it's so essential to snap them out of, their internal spiraling and, you know, refocus them on something else to help kind of ground them. And anyway, it's a whole process, but it's, as you were saying, it's really nice to be able to speak more openly and honestly about those kind of struggles, especially with our own neurodivergence within the dads group and the dads that a lot of the dads, especially those that are on Discord, they're all very we tend to build communities around us that mirror us in some way, and so as my friends, most of my friends are very neurodivergent. So when they're inviting people, they're going to be inviting people that are probably also very neurodivergent. And
Sure.
so the neurotypical people are the ones that are usually like, oh, cool, I saw this on social media. I don't know anybody, but I'll check it out. And
Right.
so we end up having this core group of people that are all like, very neurospicy and just loving life together. And,
When people
the
show up
fact that,
like, wait, why did you come to this? How did
yeah,
you who invited you? How did you hear about this? Oh, just
it
on a
always,
okay. I
yeah.
guess that happened.
It always throws me off when someone walks up and they're like, "Hey, I'm such and such," and I'm like, "Oh, hi." Like,
Yeah.
I'm not used to being like having someone be so sociable at
Right.
first,
Yeah.
but
You're like,
it,
do you know the secret code?
yeah, I know. Got a secret handshake.
Yeah. No, that is awesome because you're right. And usually, typically, and it's not even just the dads group. I see this
Yeah,
anytime I go to a networking event. You walk in and you see the people kind of standing around the corners or waiting at the edge by the drink table, kind of deciding when to approach the group or if they should, or is that, where's the end, or you'll see a couple people kind of meet up together where the conversation's like, hey, is this your first time here too? Or
yeah. Well, and
um,
especially if you are working within communities that are not, um, that representation is maybe very difficult. And
Hmm.
so, I know that, I'm, a cis white guy. I've got nothing crazy about me in that sense.
Hmm.
And so I'm not exactly always the most approachable for people who are in marginalized communities. And so for them, sometimes getting into those bigger social spaces where the marginalized community is not the focus of the group itself,
Oh, sure.
then they might not be as open to wanting to, be open with everyone else that's there,
Yeah.
because you don't necessarily know if it's safe to be
Mhm.
you in that space. And I hope that as this group continues to grow, that becomes less and less of an issue, because I want people to feel warm and comfortable there. So
Right. It's definitely a good group for that. And I think like to your point about it, it does surprise you when people are all of a sudden like, wait, how are you so comfortable? Where they're just like, hey, I'm here. What's going on? You're like, whoa, like, did I miss the last three things you picked up to? Because that's so easy for you. Because I'm
yeah,
very extroverted, but I'm still pretty shy. So when I go to a new thing, it always takes me a little time to kind of be like, okay, I'll ease in around the edge. Um, but yeah, so let's talk about the dad thing. The Dads
yeah,
Group
sure.
in Tacoma. Tell us how people can find it. What kind of things are happening? I'm trying to keep my mouth shut because I know a lot of the things, but like everything.
Yeah, it's the brief overview, it is literally what it sounds like. It is a group of dads in Tacoma. We started in 2016 as a branch off of a consignment store in the Proctor district in North Tacoma, called the Blooming Kids Consignment Store. So we were the BK Dads Group when we first started, and then they had a total loss fire at their location. And when that happened, the original organizer was in a spot where he just wasn't going to have the time to organize anymore. And so I jumped on and took over the organizing process, and rebranded, renamed Tacoma Dad, so we were a little bit easier to find. And from there, a lot of slow growth, barely getting, three guys together for a dad's night out. We only had two events. We would do a dad's night out, and we would do a dad's adventure day with the kids.
Mhm.
And there were definitely several events where I was just there alone. And so, like, it was, I was just determined that if I'm going to put something on a calendar, I'm going to be there.
Mhm.
And if I'm there alone, I've got to have to deal with the fact that I'm there alone.
Yeah.
And being a very awkward, like socially awkward person when it comes to small groups like that, I'm sure there were probably other dads that may have, in fact, I know there's at least one event where the another dad showed up, didn't recognize me or notice me. I didn't recognize or notice them. So we were both there for the time,
Oh,
but just
yeah.
didn't connect.
Mm.
And so, now that's much less of an issue because we are a much larger group and we have much bigger meetups, but
Right.
it
And
was
you got
tough.
fires out, and we got table
Yeah.
and stuff.
Again, we got, apparel and such. So it's easier to identify that we
Right.
are a part of this group. We didn't have those things back then. But yeah, like it started out small, and then things really struggled through the pandemic. We tried to continue chatting a little bit, but
Mhm.
getting guys to open up, getting guys to talk on social media is not easy.
Right.
Um, it's Some of it is our own internalized, like, monkey brain, and trying to, we don't talk about our emotions, and we
Right.
don't want to open up to each other. And the nice thing about this group as a whole is that we are very against that. Like, this is an open space for us to be honest with each other.
Yeah.
And the more I see guys verbalizing a lot of the struggles that we're dealing with, whether it's through like the mental health channel on Discord or in person in meetings, and just being able to be like, yeah, no, I'm not just going to say fine.
Right.
I'm going to say, yeah, no, this has been a really crappy couple of months.
Mhm.
This is the things that we've been struggling with. And a lot of that coming from, we've got a team of three guys who do most of the organizing with Jake and with Paul. And we've all got our own kind of piece of the pie of what we manage. And,
Mhm.
hoping that as we are honest with each other and we're honest with the guys in the group and kind of lead by example in that sense of just being like, no, I it's been a tough mental health week. or it's
Yeah.
been a tough day,
Hmm.
that more guys are quick to jump on board and say that, yeah, so am I, to be
Well,
honest.
yeah, a lot of times you see like a comment get started, like, man, I'm dealing with this. Has anybody had, and all of a sudden you just see, 'cause it's kind of like opening the floodgates of,
Yeah.
yeah, man, I dealt with that a couple years ago, or I'm in the same space right now, or, whatever the thing is, or I've tried this, and, or just,
Yeah.
let it out, just share it. And sometimes that's helpful enough.
Yeah. Without getting onto the soapbox that I so easily get onto when it comes to this topic, it's the mentality of just kind of quietly suffering, that that's
Mhm.
just what we're going to do. And, we've, not we as in my generation of men and of dads, but past generations of men, like we've done this to ourselves.
Yeah,
We have set up an environment where, we have all the power and we have all the authority, and we don't want to show weakness to each other because we've set up systems that, like, a sign of weakness is an opportunity for you to be taken advantage of. And, with modern generations, we're very much so bucking against that and going, okay, but it's incredibly lonely. Mental health is terrible. And I don't get to be a present, father by working ridiculous hours to make all of this money to buy all of these things that I don't even really get to enjoy. For what? you
right.
know so yeah, we as a group, one of the biggest things that we talk about is being present fathers,
So,
being there for our kids.
and that was kind of, I was going to ask you about, but you kind of covered it already, was that, you know, doing all these events and stuff and having the group, how does that make you a better dad? But I think you kind of just summed it up with being a present father.
Yeah, we have a lot of events going on, and it's grown because we have dads that are interested in different subjects, different topics. And if we've got, I'm very quick to um not take ownership of what has happened with this group, because I see guys being given an opportunity to step up and to connect with each other. And if I've done anything, I've created a space where, like, these guys feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of, other dads organizing and doing the things.
Hmm.
So we're doing, weekly cold water plunges together, and that's a co-ed event. So we've got dads, partners, local community members that aren't even a part of the dads group,
Hmm.
that are joining up with us, and that started based off of another community, which is the Puget Sound Plungers. And Renata and Don, as they've done an incredible job of building that community. We branched off to do our own thing with it, and we've been loving that. We've got our dad's night out, first Wednesday of the month. We've got two different dad's game nights where dads get together over at Silver King Games over in South Tacoma Way. And, we play board games, play some D&D, hang out and just kind of be nerdy together. And then we've got our adventure day with the kids, where we always take the kids out, dads and kids, and family day, dads, kids, partners, the whole group. And then we have a ton of pop-up events that happen throughout the month. But we're
Yeah.
looking at anywhere from like 20 to 40 hours of scheduled events every month now.
Wow.
And
It was a lot because I know we have the coffee and there's
yep.
karaoke, there's all the one-off stuff.
Oh yeah.
And it's like there are dads that I have never met that I know are religious attenders of other events because
Yep.
there's so many things to do. And that's the nice thing, is there's not this pressure, other than a little pressure to go on the cold water plunge, but all in good fun. But there's not this pressure to be at everything or to do the things that
Yeah.
aren't in your wheelhouse. And so there are, whole circles of dads that make friendships and that are there all the time for game night, and then other dads that are always there for coffee or the adventure day. And that is neat to see because it serves the whole community in such a better way.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. We have basketball, pop-up basketball that's going to be starting up in April. And they're wanting to make, got a good handful of dads that are interested in that and making that into a regular thing, which is awesome. And especially early on, I felt like if I'm organizing all of this, I need to be able to do it, and I need to be able to be there for it. And I have a fairly limited schedule as far as like my availability. And so it's a strain on the family to get out to any of these events.
Right.
And
Well,
so we've really built kind of this mentality of like, if someone wants to do an event, I will be happily, I will happily support them in any way that I can,
mhm.
even if it's an event I know I'm not going to be able to make.
Right. Yeah, and that's the great thing is if someone says, "Man, I want to do geocaching or I want to do this thing," it's as simple as just throwing it out there and seeing if anybody else wants to join in. And but
Yeah.
also knowing that if you're adding an event, someone's got to be the point person.
Yeah.
So you're welcome to do it. There's no, hey, don't do it. And like you said, you and Paul and Jake are awesome at doing everything they can to make the event successful, but also knowing that, hey, if you're the one who wants that thing to happen, we're going to help you make it happen. But it doesn't mean that everyone has to be there. So,
Yeah. That's like our one rule about new events is that if you are wanting to organize an event or see an event come up,
mhm,
you have to be dedicated to being there for the entire time listed, whether
mhm,
nobody shows up or not, like, or
right.
whether anybody shows up or not, because not everybody, we all have an understanding with each other that life is crazy, especially with kids,
Right.
and our schedules are all over the place. So
Hmm.
even with like dad's night out, the idea of having, being there for the entire time of dad's night out, which is 7:30 to 10 p.m.
Hmm.
for some dads, it's just not doable.
Right.
They can't get there because bedtimes are later.
Right.
But the we really try to push to make sure that they're understanding that if you're just there for half an hour, if you're there for 20 minutes, like it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it to get out and do something for yourself and to
Mhm.
connect with other dads, because the alternative is isolation.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy for anybody.
Exactly.
And you are doing your partner and your family a disservice by being completely isolated and not making friends and not getting out there and sharing in community, because your mental health is no longer being prioritized at all. And we so quickly shirk that as I said, quietly suffering.
Hmm.
uh, and if we want our kids to grow up in an environment where they feel more comfortable speaking about mental health issues with each other or to a therapist, seeing the word therapist, or that like, oh, I was talking to my therapist the other day, no longer being oh my gosh, he goes to therapy. Like, what's
Yeah.
wrong with him? All sorts is wrong with me. Like, that's why I'm talking to a
Yeah.
therapist.
The fact that I'm going is what means I'm a healthy person, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah. Or I'm
but the
doing
fact that
sport.
our kids see that and see us openly talking about that makes them feel more comfortable doing that. So yeah, I'm all for dads being dads, and we are open and welcome to anyone in the area that identifies as a dad. The only thing that we say that we don't go for are we don't want like joint accounts on Facebook, that kind of a thing, because we want this to be a safe space for dads to openly talk with each other. And then, if you have beliefs that are different from kind of our core values as a group, which is inclusivity,
Hmm.
um, then this is probably not the great group for you. If
Right.
you're looking for a group to just go and vent about the old ball and chain or like how terrible your kids are, this is probably the exact group you should be in, but that kind of talk is not going to be welcomed.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you need to have access to dads
Right.
living this life of like enjoying fatherhood together,
Yeah.
because clearly you definitely need it. But yeah, we don't put up with, joking about or complaining about our partners and such.
Hmm.
We're very quick to jump in to be like, are you talking to her about that?
Hmm.
Have you verbalized that this is bothering you? Because like,
Right. Yeah, and that's one thing that's so great about this group too that I think on the outside people might not realize is that it's bigger than just the dads because it's not just, oh, dad's going out to have a beer and have those
yeah,
conversations where we're complaining about home. It's actually dads bringing their kids to events, dads bringing their partners to events, and the partners are doing their own things together now too with the Moms of South Sound, and there are lots
yeah,
of other things going on that it's what could be seen as this selfish, oh, I'm going to have me time to get out of the house and to get away from the family. couldn't be further from the truth. It's actually about making sure that dads have the most supportive community they can to be the best partners and fathers they can be.
Yeah. And even the like the mentality of like of me time is, the original group was set up to have a balance to it, which
Hmm.
is that dads were having an evening to themselves. And then on a Saturday afternoon, Saturday morning, dads were taking the kids away so that their partners have time to themselves.
Right.
And now that's come even further full circle as the moms group, Moms of the South Sound, yeah. Uh, as the moms are able to come back and say, well, they're doing their mom's night out now. And then a mom's adventure day with the kids. And so now when the dads are taking the kids for adventure day, the moms are meeting up for coffee together. And when moms are taking adventure day, the dads are meeting up for coffee together. And so there is this broader community synergy that's happening, and it's wonderful.
It,
And I'm
it is.
so excited to see it.
It is great, and I can't say enough good things about it. My only thing is I wish that I had this group younger, like when I was raising my kids still. But that's the great thing is that there are dads that are like their kids are about to be born or were just born that are like I don't even know where this adventure is going. And then there's dads whose kids are like mine, where they've grown up and moved out of the house and about to be grandpa, and we still have dad issues and we still have uh,
Yep.
things to deal with and things going on, and it's a supportive group all the way around. So
Yeah. I love it. We have a broad group of ages, and diversity represented in the group.
mhm.
And it is really a reflection of Tacoma as a whole. And the more exposure that we get, that we're not just a bunch of dudes connecting to have a beer one night a month, the
Right.
more that people are able to see the broader scope of what we do, um, the more excited I get, because it's needed. We need
Yeah.
dads who are willing to be there, especially with, last year, and it's coming up again this year. We've already got, um, you know, got it on the calendar for us, but with Pride,
Hmm.
Tacoma Pride last year was my first one, and it was like all of the best of Tacoma on display.
Yeah.
Everyone was just loving each other and hanging out, and it was so great to see. And the dads were there giving out free dad hugs as an opportunity to be present in a situation where some people don't necessarily have a father or a parental figure who is there to love and support them. And we want to be that stand-in dad to say, I'll be there for you, like,
Yeah. Yeah,
you
and that
know
was so neat to see because you got this huge booth with a banner that everybody's signing, and then all throughout Pride, whether they're at the booth or just wandering around, you're seeing the red shirts with the free dad hugs, and I heard a lot of people talking about it throughout the day. It was pretty neat to see.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, you've mentioned Discord, you've mentioned Facebook. I know there's a website. Where's all the best places for people to find, support, connect with the Dads Group?
Yeah, the dads group is the place to go. You can go to tacomadads.com. We have a link tree set up, and we've got a handful of links to our Discord, Facebook, and even the Puget Sound Dads group, which is a broader group that I manage for the region, on Meetup. And then we also have links to the Moms of the South Sound Facebook and Discord groups. We've got links to RSVP or get more information about what we're doing. And then we also have some flyers. If you are able to print out some flyers and want to post them up around town, or get other people to figure it out, all of that is at tacomadads.com. You can follow our public content, what we're putting out there for, post event information or upcoming event information. We're on Instagram and Facebook with at Tacoma Dads. Those are both great to follow if you want to see what we're doing or what it's all about. I've been trying to post pictures and short videos and such as I can from our events to let people see like what it is that we're doing and what an event typically looks like. But all of that stuff, you can find links at tacomadads.com, and that's usually the first place that I send people.
Perfect. Well, Sean, before you go, how would you challenge people though when they're awkward this week?
Man, getting yourself out there is so difficult. And that first step of like introducing yourself to someone that you don't know, or even someone you have chatted with online, a lot of our midweek or, in between event stuff is all happening through social media. And making that first step to just like show up and be, the person to step forward and say hi feels like a wall that you're going to have to scale over. Um, but in hindsight, there have been a remarkably small amount of times when I've actually reached my hand out and introduced myself to someone where it went bad.
Mm.
Like, especially in these groups. So I would challenge people through social anxiety, through social awkwardness, be the person to just stick your arm out, your hand out, and introduce yourself, because I couldn't imagine what this group and this community would look like if I hadn't done that time and time and time and time again to get to know more guys in the community in person.
I love that. I think that's such a perfect thing to remember because someone has to do it first. Someone has to put the arm
Yep.
out. And if not, we're never going to have the connection. So that's
Yep.
gorgeous.
Absolutely.
Well, Sean, thank you so much. I appreciate all that you do in our community. Good friend, awesome person, and just appreciate you being vulnerable and opening up and sharing today, as well as the stuff you do every day. So thank you so very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
And everybody else, be sure to go out there, check out Tacoma Dads Group, give them a follow on Facebook, reach out. If you're a dad, join us. If you know a dad, get the word out that we're all over the Tacoma area with events happening all week long. So, and of course, once you do that, go out and own your awkward. Thank you so much for listening in for today's show. Be sure to visit awkwardcareer.com to continue your journey. And of course, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends so they can find their awkward side and learn how to own it.